Hello and welcome to this episode of the GrowVC Everyone Funding Startups podcast. And today's episode is a little bit more of a topical episode. I'm here with Yoko, and we're talking about some of the notable releases, press releases and other news that we've had, but also focusing on a recent one, that is the publishing of the API for developers. And we'll delve into that more in a second. First, let's recap a little bit on some of the other things that we've had going on that we've announced recently. So these have included, for example, a campus program in the US that incorporates over 70 campuses with students for a more entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also getting students on the grassroots involved with what we're doing in GrowVC, since they're anyway going to represent what we call the Facebook generation. We have two new advisors from Silicon Valley. So we have Dr. Burton Lee from Stanford University. He's a very notable person, both in the US as well as abroad. He travels extensively and is very recognized and revered in the startup space. We have Sarosh Kumana, who is from Sandhill Angels. He's a very experienced investor in Silicon Valley, involved in sustainability among various other roles, and he's just an exceptional person all around. So we definitely have a lot going on this fall. We're also piloting the networks with over 40 pilot partners at the moment, and there's definitely a lot going on behind the curtains. So Yoko, what else do you have lined up, or do we have lined up at the moment for the fall?
I think that one important part is really that this is not only to make one network service, but really to create a kind of open ecosystem. And many of these things, what we have done now, are somehow related to this aim, what we have. And we have seen it all the time, that to create something totally new for the startup funding market, it cannot be so that we only do it alone, or we only run like totally independent and isolated platform. We must be open. We must have many different models how we cooperate with other parties. There are technical components, how to make it easy, how to make it possible, but there are also many other components that how we can cooperate with different parties that are relevant in startup funding ecosystem. And I think that this is very much also linked to our slogan, Virtual Silicon Valley. The idea is really that the Silicon Valley traditionally is the best ecosystem where all players like investors, startups, entrepreneurs, law firms, exit market, and so on are together. And we see that really different parties can do the same also online nowadays, and we want to make one part of that work to enable that, and the important part of that is that we have different cooperation models, we have open APIs, and we have also services that third parties can easily start to utilize our platform in their own business.
Okay, and talking about Silicon Valley, in the US we will visit select cities. We have meetings lined up in New York, San Francisco, Southern California, Los Angeles, and so on. So we'll spend start of November, a few weeks, just meeting different partners that we share opportunities with. So that's something that I definitely wanted to mention. But generally speaking, if there's any sort of opportunity that you'd like to explore with GrowVC relating to anything that we do that could benefit some larger ecosystem or that you're interested in, then you're always welcome to get in touch, because we have people on 6 continents, and that definitely always helps availability. But let's focus on the API for a little bit. I think that's also one of the focal points for this episode itself. So publishing the API has been in the plans for a long time now. What do you think is the significance of the API? We talked about the ecosystem a little bit, but from a more practical point of view, why is the API so important?
I think that the API is important especially because we have done a lot of work that can be now also utilized by third parties. Crowdfunding as a whole is not very simple area. You can basically make a very simple website to do something easily. But if we think the whole service, if we think the payment systems, if we think that how to organize the investment structure and also basically have legal entities to make the investments and so on, and also the whole legal framework, what we have done, and we have used now almost 3 years to prepare a lot of things that make crowdfunding possible, make it simple, and also can handle the legal framework. We see that it's important that third parties can also, who have different kind of own services and businesses, can start to utilize this. And we see that it's important part of this network model, what we are doing, that the idea is not that all parties do all things themselves, but it's more like a network of different kind of parties that can work together. They can utilize different components from their partners, and in that way they can be an important part of the whole ecosystem. And we see that there are many, for example, services for startups that can utilize also a kind of back office functionality from our website for crowdfunding. In our press release, we have some examples, like a couple of companies in Silicon Valley that are basically working with how people can develop their ideas into business, or how startups can, for example, utilize crowdsourcing in different ways. And both of those, for example, are interested to use our crowdfunding function for the startups, because they see that it is not their focus area, and on the other hand it would be a lot of work that doesn't make sense, but basically they can utilize our API and they can get the crowdfunding functionality into their service, and basically technically it happens inside our service, including our technology and also the legal framework. And the same with an Indian company that is basically a kind of innovation development community, and they can also utilize this. So that these are some examples. But then there are also some simple examples, like that somebody can make, for example, mobile application or Facebook application where people could, for example, see the startups and maybe, for example, there could be some investment recommendation systems also. And I would say that what is always very important part of the open APIs is that there most probably will be services and innovations that can utilize the API that are totally something new, and we cannot even think what they are at the moment. And it's very much the idea of API that anybody can create his or her own innovation and for example, utilize the crowdfunding functionality.
Okay, so now we've published the Open API in the press release that was actually sent out on Wednesday this week. The API is in a sort of beta phase. What does that mean?
It basically means that we select now partners for API development, so that we have the first version of the API done, and for example, our iPhone application utilize this API. But at the same time, we know that there are still a lot of work to do. Most probably a lot of new functionalities needed also for API, and that's why we want to find some new partners who can start to utilize the existing API, but at the same time they can give also ideas how to develop the API, and also basically we can at the same time develop also the documentation and the whole process how to utilize the API